2,000 years ago, when Jesus was on the earth, a lot of people worshiped idols and made sacrifices to gods other than the one true living God we read about in the Bible. Even those who were supposed to be part of God's chosen people would visit temples and other gods and worship. One of those temples was in the town of Caesarea Philippi in northern Israel. The city sat about as far away from God's temple in Jerusalem as it could, and the people who worshiped there were also far from God in a spiritual sense. Still, Jesus decided to take his disciples to this town to teach them a very important lesson by asking them one very important question. Let's visit the town of Caesarea Philippi. Caesarea Philippi sits about 100 miles north of Jerusalem in the region known today as the Golan Heights. This would have been the far northern part of Galilee during the time Jesus walked on the earth. Today, the city is a big draw for tourists who come to take in the historical sites. During the first century, Caesarea Philippi was the location of a large temple where people would come to worship the god Pan. This god was one that people would sacrifice to for good flocks or crops and physical prosperity. He was believed to be the god of nature. You can still see the ruins of the temple when you visit the site today. There's a spring inside the mouth of a cave where people would make sacrifices. There are many ornate columns and even cutouts in the walls where idols were placed for worship. The entire temple was built into the side of a gigantic cliff, so you get the idea of just how large this temple would have been. It could easily have been the size of a 4 or 5 story building. In the book of Matthew, chapter 16, we read about Jesus bringing his disciples to Caesarea Philippi. Considering all the idol worship and evil things that would have been going on there, it's interesting that Jesus would bring them here. Why do you think he would do that? It's because he wanted them to understand something very important, and this city would be the backdrop for that lesson. He asked the disciples who they think he is. Peter said, "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God." Jesus praised Peter for his correct answer and said that on this rock he would build his church. Jesus explained that there would be a church that he, Jesus, would establish. The temple that once stood at Caesarea Philippi is gone now. It lays in ruins. Nobody's going there to worship and to make sacrifices to the god Pan anymore. However, Jesus' church lives on over 2,000 years later. So what's the rock Jesus talked about? The rock is what Peter confessed about Jesus and is the foundation of Jesus' church, that he is the Christ, the Son of the living God. Man can come up with all kinds of ideas for worship. We can invent new religions, we can build the biggest church buildings, but in the end, these things won't stand. Only Jesus and the church he established will stand forever.